Okay, thought I would just do a quick kind of introduction and review on this TimberJig. It's a TimberJig big mill system, and I think it retails for about $139 on Baileys.com. It's kind of like the Alaskan mill, but it's a little different. Anyways, let's get into it. Okay, this right here is how you set the depth of cut. Like if you want a 2x, you'd set it at 2 inches. You know, if you want something larger, you know, you can go up to 8 inches. So you could cut an 8-inch by 8-inch beam if you wanted. And the length of lumber is basically only restricted by the length of your guides, your guide boards. I don't have my guide boards with me, but you can check out my YouTube video on cutting lumber and you'll see them there. But anyways, these are real easy to operate. You just loosen the little nuts. You can slide it up and down. And I found that it's pretty accurate right on the mark, so you can just tighten it down. It has kind of a cam locking system where it's always going to be the same on each side once you tighten them down. The way this attaches to your chainsaw is your two chain guard bolts here. You take your original nuts off, and it comes with two little standoffs that hold the cover down, and then you put your nuts on the outside. And you just tighten it down, and that's it. Has a little bolt here that kind of touches the bar to keep the bar from wiggling back and forth somewhat. These little feet is what rests on your guides to just slide along the board there. And you basically just cut away. You do need a fairly long bar, whatever log you want to mill. Say you want to mill up to a 28-inch log across, then you'll need at least a 30-inch bar. That's what I've got on there. And you need a fairly large saw. I'd say a lot of people on YouTube are using like 60cc saws, like MS441s and things, but that's really too small. You need something 90 cc's or better. That's a MS660 with a big bore kit and a dual port exhaust, so it's about 92 cc's. About the equivalent of a small racing dirt bike. So it cuts pretty good. And you need to turn your oiler all the way up as high as it'll go, because you're going to create a lot of heat. You also need to get an actual ripping chain. It's different than a crosscut chain. A ripping chain will be chisel ground to 10 degrees, where a regular crosscut is usually, a round cut to about 35 degrees. So it's a different chain to do ripping with. And it does create a lot of heat, so you really need to pump the oil to it. But I mean, as far as that goes, it's 2 bolts to take it on and off, and you do have to remove your your bark spikes. A lot of smaller saws will just have one. This bigger saw had 2 spikes, one on each side of the bar. You have to remove those. So I've found the best way to do it is to cut up a bunch of logs, 10 or 15 logs, whatever length you want your lumber to be, and then put the TimberJig on and mill all those logs. You don't want to cut 1 or 2 logs and then switch your chain and switch your TimberJig on, take your bark dogs or whatever the spikes you want to call them, take those off and switch everything around every 2 logs or so. It's better to cut 10 or 15 logs and then spend 2 or 3 days just milling. As far as how much gas it uses, to mill 1 entire log, which I got 5 2x8s by 8 foot long out of, it took 1.5 tanks of gas. So, you know, not very much gas at all. Maybe, I don't know, 1/3 of a gallon or something. So it's really cheap to do it this way. It's pretty labor intensive, but you get a better board. You know, you're cutting a full 2 inches by whatever width, you know, 8 inches or 2x4s or whatever. They're going to come out, you know, whatever you set it at. You can set it to 1.5 by 3.5, you know, to match what the lumber yard will give you. But, you know, I'm cutting out a white oak, so I figure, you know, go the full 2 inches by 4 inches. You know, it's a more solid piece of wood, and it'll carry more of a load and all that. Just like, you know, ceiling joists or whatever. If you were going to build like a 2-story, you know, a blueprint might call for 2x10s or some big piece of wood from the lumber yard, where if you're using, you know, a hardwood like white oak and you're cutting the full dimension, you know, 2 by whatever, you could probably get away with a 2x8 instead of a 2x10. It'll just carry more weight. But that's basically it. It's a simple little doodad. The costs involved, like I said, it's about $139 for the. Get out of here, cat. It's about $139 for the actual jig, and then it'll come with instructions on how to make the guide boards and everything. You have to supply the 1-bys yourself. So maybe about $160 altogether into the jig, and then the saw. I got the saw used from a guy. It was actually recently rebuilt by him, so it's basically a new saw. And I think I gave him $750 for it. And a lot of people will use like Oregon chains and stuff like that, real high price chains. I just had the steel guy make me up a couple rip chains, and they're like $23 a piece instead of $60 for the other one. So that's the way I'm going with that. But I mean, other than that, you know, a brand new MS660 is like $1,200. So if you can find one used, that'd be the way to go. So you might have maybe $1,000 into everything you need to mill your own lumber, and then it's just a matter of, you know, going out and doing it. Over the span of building an entire house, you know, you're looking at $4,000 or $5,000 for the lumber just to frame a house if you go to the lumber yard, you know. So $1,000, you know, you just cut your cost by 4/5. I mean, and you get a better result. You know, you've got a white oak hardboard instead of pine or whatever crap they do at the lumber yard. So, but that should be about it. Overall, I'm pretty impressed with it. It does good. It cuts good square lumber. And I've never done it before. You know, I've used a big circular sawmill before, so I understood the process of you know, milling the cants and then getting your lumber out of it. But as far as actually using a chainsaw mill, I'd never done it before, and I got good results the first time. So it's something that just about anybody can do. You just have to have the initial investment. But that's about it. You know, if you've got the standing timber, why not do it?